Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil Anbiya wal Mursaleen. Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam. Tasliman kathiran kathiran. From Abadu, my brothers and sisters, we come to one of the very important and critical incident in the Seerah after Sulh Hudaybiyah, and that is the Ghazwa Mu'tah. Now, interestingly, the word Ghazwa, as we talked about before, is applied to a battle expedition that is commanded by Rasulullah himself. So we say Ghazwatul Badr or Ghazwatul Uhud because Rasulullah was the commander. But in the case of any other military expedition which is commanded by anyone other than Rasulullah, it's called a Sariya, not a Ghazwa. But in this case, in the case of Mu'tah, it is still called a Ghazwa, which shows the extreme importance of this. And this was the first time that Rasulullah sent an army to challenge the Byzantine Empire. Now, in those days, they did not use the word Byzantine, because Byzantine is a term that was coined centuries later. The Arabs of the time, they used to call what was the Roman Empire, they used to call them Rome. They used to call them Romans. And if you go fast forward many centuries, when Muhammad I conquered Constantinople and changed the name to Istanbul, he called himself Caesar of Rome. He did not call himself Amir al-Mu'minin. He didn't say I am the Sultan. He didn't say I am the Khalifa. He said I am the new Caesar, the Caesar of Rome. So it shows us the magnificence, the power of the Roman Empire. It was so all-pervasive that even the enemies, literally the one who defeated the Roman Empire and who brought about the end of the Byzantine Empire, end of the Roman Empire, or Eastern Roman Empire, called himself the Caesar of Rome and not some Muslim or Islamic name. Now, this army that Rasulullah sent was comprised of 3,000 soldiers. And Rasulullah did something which he had not done before, which is that he appointed 3 amirs. He appointed 3 leaders for this army, and he said the amir is Zayd bin Haritha. If he is killed, Ja'far bin Abu Talib will replace him, and if he is killed, Abdullah bin Rawaha will replace him. Now, when a statement like that is made by the Rasulullah, then this is the Sahaba took it as being, and of course we also share the same belief, as being the Bashara of Shahada, as being the glad tidings of Shahada. Now, those who are not used to this way of thinking might say, well, this is talking about death. So-and-so is killed, and you are saying that surely he will be killed because the Nabi ﷺ said if he is killed. And you are saying this is Bashara, is good news. How is it good news? Because Shahada, martyrdom, is not death. Martyrdom is life. It is eternal life with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Death in this life is not death, it is life with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, بَلْ أَحْيَاهُمْ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ. In another place Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, بَلْ أَحْيَاهُمْ وَعِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ. That they are alive and they are with their Rabb and they receive the provision, the rizq. And another place Allah said they are alive but you do not know. That is why the principle of somebody who dies a shaheed, a martyr in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that there is no ghusl for him, there is no kafan for him, and there is no salatul janazah for him. You must just make dua and that's it. And there is no salatul janazah and so on, because this person is considered to be alive. He is not. Salatul janazah is for the dead. Consequently, in Uhud, when Rasulullah faced the Quraysh and 70 Sahaba were martyred, Rasulullah did not do janazah for any of them. He made dua for all of them, and that is evidence that this is that Shahada is life. So Nabi Sallallahu made this statement. Now, the army left. So this was on a Friday. It was early morning after Salat al-Fajr. Abdullah bin Rawaha radiallahu anhu, however, and this is a very important matter here, so listen carefully. Abdullah bin Rawaha radiallahu anhu, he had this thought that today is Friday, this is most probably the last Friday that I will pray with Rasulullah. So why don't I pray with him Jummah and then leave and catch up with the army. So I get best of both worlds. Now think about this. Here is the Sahabi alayhi salam. He's making his own ijtihad, his own ruling and judgment for himself. His intention is entirely pure. His intention is to get the maximum benefit for himself as he can get, and there's nothing wrong in that kind of an intention. He wants to, what the action that he wants to do is not a haram action. He wants to pray Jum'ah behind Rasulullah. Now what can be better than that? Nothing. But see what happened. When he turned up on Jum'ah, Rasulullah saw him and he said, why are you here? He said, why haven't you gone? He said, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I wanted to pray Jum'ah with you and I can catch up with them now. He said, I have a fast horse, I can get there. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him, even if you spend all the money in the world, think about this. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying to him, even if you spend all the money in the world, you will not be able to catch up with them in reward. Right? You will not be able to catch up with them in reward. Now this shows the importance of obedience to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Obedience to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What he says is done. Must follow it. This also shows the importance of dawah, because the army was going to fight the Christians. This is one of the forms of dawah, and shows that that dawah is more important even than praying behind Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because dawah is the essence of his mission. And when you are doing that, you are promoting and supporting the mission. This has importance and this has superiority even over just praying with him, just worship by itself. So it's a very important lesson for us to understand. It's also a very important lesson to understand that the obedience to the Nabi alayhi salam is of such enormous importance. And therefore, when there is an order of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to use your own intelligence and your own reasoning and say, well, this because of that and so on, even though all the reasoning might well be correct, it might be reasoning which sounds reasonable, which is reasoning which comes from a good intention. Still, the disobedience is recorded, and therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's reward is lessened or punishment might come but for disobeying Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even though the reason you disobeyed may have positive connotations. Now, the army reached, they were going north to Sham, which is present-day Syria. They reached, when they reached present-day Jordan, they received intelligence that the Romans had mobilized an army of 200,000 soldiers. So now here is the situation of 3,000 on one side and 200,000 on the other side. Completely, this is like sure death. Total annihilation is guaranteed practically. Now these 200,000 soldiers, half of them were Roman soldiers and the others were Christian Arabs. The Roman army had comprised of two kinds of soldiers. One was Roman soldiers, Roman citizen soldiers, who were within quotes Italian, most of them, or all of them. And the other were mercenaries, and they were not mercenaries; they were auxiliaries, who came from other parts of the Roman Empire. So the auxiliaries could have Franks in it, it could have Germans in it, Gauls in it. It could have, in this case, it was Syrian Arabs, and so on and so forth. So it could be soldiers from other parts of the Roman Empire. So in this case, it was the Roman soldiers, half of the army, and the other half were Christian Arabs. who were allies. They were auxiliary soldiers, and they were the allies of Romans and Sham. So 3,000 Muslim soldiers against 200,000 of their enemies. Now this was completely, as I said, impossible and unheard of. Also, Roman soldiers came with the aura of the Roman army, which was a professional army. It was used to campaigning. It was used to soldiers who were paid a salary, whose profession was soldiering and fighting. They did nothing else. They had a fearsome reputation for their discipline. Their discipline was brutal, completely and totally brutal, and their training and their ruthlessness. Just to give you an idea, a Roman soldier on a march would march carrying a load of his weapons, his equipment, and so on, which amounted to about 50 kilograms. He carried this load of 50 kilograms, and he walked and he marched for 15 miles in a normal day. 15 miles. And at the end, and this 15 miles they did between 5 and 6 hours. So he's going, at a phenomenal race. And at the end of the 5 and 6 hours, that Roman soldier would then work with his group, with his teammates, with his military co-soldiers to build a fort. So every night the Romans camped and they built a fort, a temporary fortress for their own safety. This was standard procedure. Now imagine the physical fitness that we are talking about here. Somebody who's carrying that kind of a load and he's marching 15 miles. And today you walk for 5 miles, you think you've done a great job. But imagine this was the common, normal Roman soldier. We are not talking about great individuals of great athletic and strength and merit. No, every Roman soldier did that. Now, so these were not tribesmen who could not sustain campaigns. These were seasoned campaigners. This was literally the army of the greatest empire on earth of the time. Now, some of the Sahaba, when they got this intelligence, and they knew these people. They knew these people on a face-to-face basis. So some Sahaba suggested that they should send a message to Rasulullah that this is what we are facing, and then wait for him to say what he has to say. Abdullah bin Rawaha said, however, he said to them, "O men," he said, "what you dislike is what you have come to seek." Why did you come in the path of Allah? To be shaheed fi sabilillah. So he said, "Oh man, what you dislike is what you have come to seek." So what is the reason for delay? Why should we wait? Is it fear of death? What is the point of that? Because what's the point of fearing death? Because we came here to seek death. We are not fighting them based on our numbers, but based on the religion with which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has honored us. Only two things can happen. Either we win or we gain shahada. In both cases you win. Now, see the attitude and the way of the Sahaba. This comes through in so many incidents in the Sirah. These were not people who are, everyone has their own idea, and we tend to be wedded to our ideas. But these were not people like that. If somebody came up with the truth, and the truth went directly opposite of what they wanted or what they believed until then, they would accept it. Their hearts were so open and so welcoming to the truth. So here is Abdullah bin Rawaha literally giving them psychological feedback. He's telling them, this is why we are delaying, because we are we afraid of death? What's the delay? We came here to fight. Here is the fight. So fight. If you win, you win. If you don't win, you win anyway, because you are shaheed fi sabilillah. They did not go against that. They accepted. They said Ibn Rawaha is right, and let's go forward. Now, Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu was one of those soldiers. He accepted Islam. He came to Islam in Khaybar, and he was with this army. Now he says, I attended the Battle of Mu'tah. When they came close, the Roman soldiers, the Roman army came close. He said, we saw what nobody can face. We saw weapons, we saw preparation, we saw silk and gold and brocade. And he says, my eyes were dazzled. Bariq al-basari. Like barq is lightning. He said, bariq is like what happens after you look into a flash of lightning, everything goes blind. So he said, this is what happened to me. I said, I am looking at this and I am absolutely horrified at this army which we are facing. Now this showed on his face. And Thabit bin Arqam radiallahu anhu was a senior Sahabi, one of the Badriyin, one of the Sahaba who took part in the Battle of Badr. He was standing next to Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu, and he looked at him and he saw this expression in his face, and he smiled and he says it. And this is mentoring, ongoing mentoring. Here is a senior Sahabi giving his wisdom to a junior one. So he says to him, it looks like you are seeing a huge force. Yeah, so he said, so he said to him, he said, it looks like you are seeing a big force. So you can imagine Abu Hurairah was saying almost, well, what are you saying? I am seeing, aren't you seeing the same thing? He said, just look at them. Abu Hurairah said, just look at them. Thabit bin Arqam smiled and he said, you are not with us in Badr. You were not with us in Badr. We are not given victory based on our numbers. We are not given victory because of our numbers. You can see this same thing happening many years later after Fatah Makkah in the Battle of Hunayn, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changed the tide of battle because of the same thing. Because people thought they can win because of their numbers and their weapons, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala flipped it over. So here, before that, we are seeing this where Thabit bin Arqam is advising Abu Hurairah and he's saying, you are not with us in Badr, because in Badr they were 313, and the other side there were 1500. So they were big numbers. So he said, you are not with us in Badr because we are not given victory based on our numbers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives victory based on taqwa, gives victory based on our ta'alluq with Him, not based on numbers. Allah does not give victory for you to conquer land. The victory for Islam is the victory of haqq over batil, the victory of truth over falsehood. So instead of truth, if you substitute the truth with land, with money, with wealth, with empire, with gaining authority and power, you will not get victory. Victory it dilutes and it corrupts the niyyah, which is to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Victory comes only and only for the propagation of haqq. Islam does not sanction battles for increasing empire and increasing and making more money and enslaving people. No, it's only for the sake of opening the doors for the spread of Islam. Nothing else. So then battle started, and Zayd bin Haritha radiallahu anhu went forward. Now again, these are lots of lessons here in terms of battle tactics and how these battles were fought and how different groups, how they fought the battles. Because for example, the Arabs didn't fight battles the same way as the Romans. Right? You didn't have normally in a Roman battle the general would not start off by leading the battle. There are arguments, pros and cons for both. The general would be directing the battle from the back, and other commanders would fight. But in the way the Arabs fought, the way the Sahaba fought anyway, was different. So in this case, Zayd bin Haritha radiallahu anhu, he carried the flag and then he went forward with the banner of Islam. And the narrator says that until he was lost among the lances of the enemy, they couldn't even see where he was. He fought valiantly until he was killed. Shaheed fi sabilillah. Then Ja'far bin Abi Talib went forward. He felt his horse was, something wrong with his horse. It was hindering him, so he dismounted and he went ahead on foot. And then they cut off his. Again, he's carrying the flag, so they cut off his right arm, in which the flag was, he caught it with his left hand. They cut that off, and he held it in the stumps, on his chest like this, until they killed him also. And then Abdullah bin Rawaha radiallahu anhu went forward, and Rasulullah had said, he said, Zayd bin Haritha is the Amir, and after him Jafar bin Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, and then after him Abdullah bin Rawaha radiallahu anhu, and after that he said, choose your own leader. So third one, Abdullah bin Rawaha, it came to his turn. He was at that time eating a piece of meat when he heard the sound of the fighting, and he said to himself, they are fighting and you are still here. Sort of reminding himself. He said, they are fighting and you are still here. And then he charged forward, and he fought valiantly until he was killed. Zayd bin Arqam radiallahu anhu then said, O Muslims, choose for yourselves a leader. So they said to him, you lead us, because he was the senior man. He said, no, I will not lead you, choose someone else. So they chose Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu. Now this was they knew him, they knew Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu, they knew his reputation and so on and so forth. So they chose him. Now this was the first time that Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu was leading the Muslims in the army, because as we know, he also had recently accepted Islam, and there were many people who were his seniors, and so therefore he didn't have a chance to actually lead a battle. This was the first time that he was leading the Muslims. Rasulullah in this case, while this was happening, he would receive the news of the battle in Medina through Jibreel salam. So he said to the Sahaba, the banner was carried by Zayd until he was killed, and then it was carried by Ja'far until he was killed, and then it was carried by Ibn Rawaha until he was killed, and then the banner was carried by one of the swords of Allah, by one of the Suyufillah, swords of Allah, because he gave this title of Saifullah to Khalid bin Walid. So he's saying that this is happening, and imagine this is subhanAllah, what those days must have been, because Rasulullah is in Medina. This is happening hundreds of miles away, up north in Syria, and he's seeing it real time, and he's giving them information. Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu says that 9 swords broke in my hand on that day. 9 swords. Imagine Khalid radiallahu anhu is fighting, and one after the sword breaks, he gets another one. He says, until finally there was a Yemeni broadsword that stayed with me till the evening. Now Khalid bin Walid, of course, being a general, having that specialized knowledge to understand what was going on, and therefore he had the wisdom. So he started a strategic retreat. Now this is very important, because if you are in a battle like this, there's one of two outcomes. One is that you win, but if you don't win, if the soldiers retreat on their own, it becomes a rout. They will just run, and then everybody is annihilated. So retreating is a much more difficult thing than even sometimes than advancing, because while you're retreating, you're still fighting, you're still maintaining, you're still trying to minimize casualties, and then you are slowly coming back out. And this is what Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu managed to do, to retreat, continue to fight, but retreat without the enemy noticing that it was happening. Then night fell, and in the night they wouldn't fight, so night fell, fighting stopped. At that time, Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu switched the side. So the side which was right in front facing the Romans, he put them back, and he replaced them with the soldiers who the Romans hadn't seen until that time. So left flank in the place of the right flank. In the morning, when the fighting started again, the Romans saw new faces, and they thought the Muslims had received reinforcements in the night. Now this scared them, because they had developed a very healthy respect for the Muslims in the previous day's fighting, and so they said, well, when there were so few, this is what they did, and now they seem to have more, so they started retreating. And so it was very strange because this was the army which had the numbers, but they started retreating, and there were the Christian Arabs in front. So they, and Khalid bin Walid was able to extract his army out of this very difficult situation, and he brought them safely back to Medina. Only 12 Muslims were killed in this whole episode. Only 12 of them died, and of course, a large number of the enemy. We then come to another very important aspect of the seerah, which was the letters that Rasulullah sent to the different kings. And but before we come to that, let me tell you about a very interesting incident. Well, we'll come to the incident. So let us to the king. Before we go to the letters to the king, I think I'll do the letters in the next session. From these battles, we understand some very important things. One of the most important things that we understand here is the issue of being of ambitious goals. If you look at it, subhanAllah, there's nothing that can be more ambitious than what Rasulullah did. And that ambition is, the ambition is for the sake of Allah, for the sake of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is not trying to build a great empire, to hand it down to his children or something. He's not creating a dynasty. He's not doing any of that. He is doing this only for the sake of da'wah, to open the doors for the spread of Islam into the rest of the world of that time. So this is very important for us to keep this in mind and say, when we are talking about the spread of Islam, we're talking about what can be done, can't be done, and so on. All of these arguments and so on we have. The thing is that we look at we look at this from a very material sense. So say, what should we do depending on the conditions and so on, what resources we have and don't have. But we don't see this from the other sense, which is the most important one, which is from a spiritual sense. And say that what I want to do, is it something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants me to do? Is it something that I will get the help of Allah for? And so on. And then do it for that reason and for those things. It's very important to understand that and keep this in mind. Because the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes based on the intention and based on the ikhlas of the niyyah, the sincerity of the intention and the sincerity of the effort. So it is very, very important to constantly check our hearts to ensure that our hearts are pure and that our actions are done only and only for the sake of the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not for our own personal needs and goals and so on and so forth. This is very important because especially in public works, I'm not just talking about wars and fighting, but anyway, take for example any public charity. People give charity and then they put their name on the thing. This is masjid built by so and so. Allah knows who built the masjid. Why must you put your name on that? Because if you put your name on it, then obviously there will be something in your heart to say, people must know that I did this job. Why? For what? If you did it for Allah, Allah knows. It's not haram to put your name, you can put your name. But I'm saying that it is much better not to do that. It's much better to do charity for the sake of Allah and let Allah be the judge and let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be the only one who knows that. Good deeds done in secret. Right? It is very, very important. Good deeds done in secret. This is one of the wasail of acceptance of dua. Do something secretly that nobody knows, and then when you need something, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, Ya Rab, I did this for you, and if you accepted it, grant my dua. And we have this hadith of the three young men who were trapped in a cave, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala moved the rock which had slid down and trapped them based on this kind of a dua, which is secret deeds done only for the sake of Allah. So I remind myself and you, let us be very clear in our minds and always have ikhlas as the number one thing that we must have when we go before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وصلى الله على نبي الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا رب الراحمين.